Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about the simple fact that training for size versus strength is not really a big difference in your programming. People misunderstand that. They think it has entirely to do with rep ranges and everything else, and what I'm telling people is that it really isn't. Right? It really isn't. It is largely the way that you execute movements. Because at the end of the day, size equals strength potential. And when you look at it, the reason this gets confused is because people start seeing at the most divergent ends, right? At the extreme ends of bodybuilding and strength sports, it's not the same. Meaning the biggest powerlifters may not look as jacked as the biggest bodybuilders. They might actually be, but they may not look it. And the biggest powerlifters may not be moving the same weights the biggest powerlifters do. The biggest bodybuilders might not. So it creates some confusion, but here's what people need to realize. Everyone should be training for improved overload, right? Increasing progressive overload, increasing workload. That is, and I'm getting really tongue-tied, I'm just going to run with it. That is really kind of the key to hypertrophy. Hypertrophy meaning muscle gains. The ability to apply leverage to a barbell with your muscles that you have built is where we display maximum strength. Now the thing is, maximum strength is usually displayed inside of a contest of rules. In other words, you can't compare strength of two people unless they're doing the same exercise. For it to be the same exercise, there needs to be the same rules in place. Like for example, in the deadlifting, standardized height on a bar, no hitching allowed, obviously, raw, no straps, things like that, right? What you guys just saw me do there would be right at the bleeding edge of a meet legal deadlift with 635. That was a meet legal bench with 365, right? Okay, everyone get that? And if you look at the bench I'm doing right here next, this is building my chest. Those strength levels are not comparable. Like if you were to just take them as flat normal exercises, I'm only doing like sets of 10, 11 reps here with 225. That was a 365 bench with a 2-count pause. The numbers don't quite add up, do they? Why? I'm doing a harder version. What's the difference? On one of them, I am adjusting my leverages and the way I set up to cut a little range of motion out of the hardest part where the most tension is placed on the muscle so that I can apply the most force from my muscles to the weight. Okay? In other words, using my muscles as efficiently as possible to move the most weight inside of a meet legal context, which would be pausing on the chest, feet on the floor, butt on the bench, okay? When I'm trying to build muscle, I am trying to do the opposite. I am trying to make the muscles be slightly disadvantaged so that the weight puts the most tension and force on the muscle, not the other way around. What does that mean? Well, that means trying to make sure that I select a grip that stretches the pecs the most, keeping my back pretty flat so that I'm not arching. In other words, it's all about increasing range of motion and stretching the muscle deeper. I'm doing a harder version of the bench, obviously very controlled. Okay? I'm trying to use the pecs as much as possible. The same with this incline. I'm doing a version of the incline bench to where I make the pecs work as hard as possible. The weight is working against them because I can incline more than this for the same number of reps. Okay? You guys have seen me, I think, do, like 8 reps before with 225. This is just sets of 10 with 185. Right? That's 40 pounds difference. Those reps are real close. One of them, I'm trying to move as much weight as possible. In other words, setting up my leverages, leg drive, everything to where I'm exploding the most weight using the muscle I have. What I'm doing in all these is forcing more tension onto the muscles themselves. And it's really just the way you execute it. Your squats are the same way. You guys saw me doing kind of an Olympic style squat, no belt there, high reps right there at the start, going well below parallel, getting as deep as possible, trying to use my quads as much as possible in terms of overloading them. On a power squat for a max, we want to actually have the knee bend as little as possible while still reaching a meet legal depth, which is parallel. Therefore, the quads are not put as much of at a disadvantaged position. We're trying to use the quad that we have to move the most weight. When we do the other version, we're trying to use as little weight as possible to put the most tension on the quad. That is the biggest difference between training for them. And at the novice level, there's no real difference. Like, you're going to get bigger and stronger with either method as long as everything's programmed decent and you're working hard, eating enough. As you get more advanced, there's a divergence that happens there. And that it really is that simple. And everyone wants to think, oh, it's about this program. No, because even the strongest lifters do all these high rep stuff. Okay, the strongest lifters you see do a bunch of high rep work for their triceps and hamstrings and everything else. Trying to get bigger. They dial in the technique on the big exercises to put themselves, and myself, because I've broken state records in 2 weight classes in powerlifting. I've been invited to worlds in 2 different feds over the years, right? So we are, again, trying to move as much weight as possible in that scenario. In the other, we're trying to build as much muscle as possible. But the thing is, it's, again, there's not a huge difference for the novice. It's just later on. But we're still trying to build muscle, because if you can get those muscles bigger, you're just dialing in the technique, right? You're coming in and trying to find the technique that makes the most efficient use of the force that your muscles are capable of producing. They're just reverses on that end. But it has everyone thinking, oh, the programming is vastly different, and it doesn't have to be. A lot of your top bodybuilders do some real heavy, low rep stuff in addition to all their volume. Most of your top strength athletes do a lot of reps to get bigger and just dial in their form to produce the most force on a certain exercise or the technique. Okay? Programming is not necessarily dramatically different. Both groups do high and low reps usually, if they're really good. The bodybuilders who are the real long timers in the game can actually lift a lot of weight, and they do some low rep stuff. The power lifters who are the long timers in the game, we tend to do a lot of real high rep stuff to build muscle so that we're not beating ourselves up with a crazy heavy weight all the time, because that muscle keeps us in the game longer. Makes us less prone to injuries, gives us more support for everything, will let us lift more weight without getting beat up in the long term, because we're not just hammering the weight hard all the time. And everyone thinks it's just about the neural drive difference from the heavy lifting. No, it's not. The neural drive is not that hard to really kind of get the most out of, or to get close to your maximum potential. It really isn't. It's mainly just technical differences. But if you can get bigger, your strength ceiling and that ability to produce force goes up. The technique just allows you to use the force that you're capable of producing more efficiently. But I want to be clear here, at the fundamental level, the programming itself doesn't necessarily have to be difference between these two. You're looking at technique differences of working the muscle the hardest versus lifting the most weight. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.